Okay, Pete Seeger has said, "There is something about participating. It is almost my religion. If the world is here in 100 years, people will know the importance of participating, not just being spectators." Please settle in a little more comfortably. Close your eyes if you wish. Allow your body to relax into this sacred space. Breathe deeply. Breathe out slowly. Breathe in compassion. Breathe out peace. Our musical meditation is Pete Seeger's Turn, Turn, Turn. Please feel free to join in. Remember what Pete said about participating.
Our reading today is, appropriately, by Pete Seeger. Once upon a time, wasn't singing a part of everyday life as much as talking, physical exercise, and religion? Our distant ancestors, wherever they were in this world, sang while pounding grain, paddling canoes, or walking long journeys. Can we begin to make our lives once more all of a piece? Finding the right songs and singing them over and over is a way to start. And when one person taps out a beat while another leads into the melody, or when three people discover a harmony they never knew existed, or a crowd joins in on a chorus, as though to raise the ceiling a few feet higher, they may also know there is hope for the world.
Pete was born on May 3rd, 1919, so this is his centennial year, to musicologist Dr. Charles Seeger and concert violinist Constance Edson Seeger. A Harvard University dropout, by the way, he was in the same class, or he entered the same class with John F. Kennedy, but he dropped out. Pete met, traveled, and performed with the great folk songwriter Woody Guthrie in 1940, inspiring Pete to write his own songs. Seeger, Guthrie, and other musicians formed the Almanac Singers. Pete was drafted into the Army in 1942. While home on leave in 1943, he married Toshi Ota, and the two remained deeply in love and supportive of one another, although some might say Toshi was the more supportive one, until her death in July 2013. Excuse me. After the war, Pete resumed his career as a performer and song collector. In 1948, he formed the Weavers with Lee Hayes, Ronnie Gilbert, and Fred Hellerman. And within 3 years, the group had sold 4 million records. Blacklisted during the McCarthy era for alleged communist sympathies, the quartet disbanded in 1953, although they continued to reunite from time to time. Pete continued to record and to perform for children at schools and camps, on college campuses, and on the international circuit, despite being banned from most TV and radio shows and many concert stages for the next 17 years. During the 60s, Pete participated in the freedom marches in Selma, Alabama, and Washington, D.C. with Dr. Martin Luther King. Later in the decade, Pete could be found at rallies protesting the Vietnam War. In 1967, Pete founded the Clearwater Organization to call attention to the pollution of New York's Hudson River and other American waterways. How many of you have seen the Clearwater or sailed on the Clearwater? Okay, they're having a July 4th sale out of Poughkeepsie that to die for. I would recommend you go to clearwater.org, find out when they're having public sales, and take one if you haven't. His musical and political activism remain benchmarks for modern musicians. His repertoire of original or adapted songs remains a rich source of material. In addition to Seeger's careers as musician and activist, he was an author. Case in point. He wrote close to 36 songbooks, instructional handbooks, children's stories, and other delightful works of fact and fiction. Pete passed away on January 27th, 2014, at the age of 94. Much of what I just said was taken from Wikipedia. I have to give credit there. So for the last 15 or so years of his life, I got to know him a little bit, standing on the corner of Route 9 and 9D up in Wappingers Falls on Saturdays between 12 and 2. We vigiled, and then we stood around the peace pole, which is still there, and sang peace songs. And I also got to know him a little bit at the Beacon Sloop Club, which to this day has First Friday sing-alongs starting around 8:30 after their general business meeting. And we got to know each other there a little bit, and he got to know some of my songs and got to know me. So here are some lessons I learned from watching Pete. That's better. Lesson 1, speak truth to power. So these are some excerpts from testimony Pete gave before the House Un-American Activities Committee on August 18th, 1955. He said, "I am not going to answer any questions as to my association, my philosophical or religious beliefs, or my political beliefs, or how I voted in any election, or any of these private affairs. I think these are very improper questions for any American to be asked, especially under such compulsion as this. I feel that in my whole life I have never done anything of any conspiratorial nature, and I resent very much and very deeply the implication of being called before this committee that in some way, because my opinions may be different from yours, or yours, Mr. Willis, or yours, Mr. Shearer, that I am any less of an American than anybody else. I love my country very deeply, sir." Question: why don't you make a little contribution toward preserving its institutions? Answer: I feel that my whole life is a contribution. Here's another instance of Pete speaking truth to power. In the mid-1960s, the war in Vietnam was heating up. There were large protests. This is how Pete described the writing and marketing of a song he wrote about that called Waist Deep in the Big Muddy. In 1967, I wrote what I thought was a real good song. I had a recording contract with Columbia Records at that time, and my friends there even agreed to put out a record of it. But the sales department just laughed at us both. The records stayed on the shelves and weren't even sent to the stores. But two young comedians, called the Smothers Brothers, yep, had a successful television show, and they asked their bosses if I could be a guest on their show. I flew out to California, sang some songs, and lastly this song. Son of a gun, when the show was supposed to be played on the air, the song had been scissored out of the tape by the higher-ups at CBS television. Now the Smothers Brothers took their argument to the newspapers. They said, CBS censors our best jokes, and they censored Seeger's best song. Finally, in January 1968, the word came from New York. Okay, you can sing the song if you want. So that was a song that we sang, one of the many songs that we sang around the Peace Pole in the 1990s. And it was as relevant then as when it had been written, and sorry to say, it's as relevant today as when it had been written. It was back in 1942, I was a member of a good platoon. We were on maneuvers in Louisiana one night by the light of the moon. The captain told us to ford a river, that's when it all begun. We were knee-deep in the big muddy when the big fool said to push on. Well, the sergeant said, sir, are you sure this is the best way back to the base? Sergeant, go on, I forded this river about a mile above this place. It'll be a little soggy, but just keep slogging, we'll soon be on dry ground. We were waist deep in the big muddy when the big fool said to push on. Now the sergeant said, sir, with all this equipment, no man will be able to swim. Sergeant, don't be a nervous Nelly, the captain said to him. All we need is a little determination, then follow me, I'll lead on. We were neck deep in the big muddy when the big fool said to push on. Well, all at once the moon clouded over, we heard a gurgle and cry. A few seconds later the captain's helmet was all that floated by. The sergeant said, turn around men, I'm in charge from now on. And we just made it out of the big muddy with the captain dead and gone. Then we stripped and dived and found his body stuck in the old quicksand. I guess he didn't know that the water was deeper than the place we once before been. Another stream had joined the big muddy about a half mile from where we'd gone. We were lucky to escape from the big muddy when the big fool said to push on. Now, I'm not gonna point any moral, I'll leave that for yourself. Maybe you're still walking, you're still talking, and you'd like to keep your health. But every time I read those tweets, that same old feeling comes on. Well, waist deep in the big muddy and the big a couple of liberties with that song. Well, I attended a left-wing summer camp in the Catskills called Camp Woodland. It was in Phoenicia. And that was one of the camps that Pete came to every summer, spent a few days, and would sing and teach us songs. And of course, he went to these summer camps because he was unable to find work due to the good graces of the House Un-American Activities Committee and other anti-communist organizations. And the powers that be evidently thought that if Pete sang to children, he couldn't do any damage. Well, he convinced a whole generation of young people to grow up to be peace and justice activists, and he pretty much single-handedly started the folk revival of the 60s. Pete has said, "Singing with children in the schools has been the most rewarding experience of my life." So later in his life, he sang with a group of kids in Beacon, where he lived, called the Rivertown Kids. And the album that they put together actually won a Grammy. This is one of the songs, it's not on the album, but he used to sing it with the kids. He wrote it with his friend Laurie Wyatt. And he deliberately wrote a song that was very simple. The first verse, the first line of each verse is repeated. So you sing the first line and then you sing it again. Slightly different tune, same words. And the chorus you'll pick up right away if you don't already know it. It goes like this. Well, this is the verse. We'll get to the chorus in a minute. When we look and we see things are not what they should be, God's counting on me. God's counting on you. When we look and we see things are not what they should be, God's counting on me. God's counting on you. Hoping we'll all pull through. 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 Me and you. It's time to turn things around. Trickle up, not trickle down. God's counting on me. God's counting on you. It's time to turn things around. Trickle up, not trickle down. God's counting on me. God's counting on you. Hoping we'll all pull through. Hoping we'll all pull through. Hoping we'll all pull through. Me and you. Now there was a verse that was added by Pete's friend Stu Candy. And Pete, once he learned it, he sang it because it's a beautiful verse. It goes like this. And when push comes to shove, the only remedy is love. God's counting on me. God's counting on you. And when push comes to shove, the only remedy is love. God's counting on me. God's counting on you. Hoping we'll all pull through. Hoping we'll all pull through. Hoping we'll all pull through. Me and you. So that was lesson 2, actually. Lesson 2 was sing with children. And lesson 3, apropos of his learning the verse from Candy and adopting it, lesson 3 was be open to learn from everyone you meet. Pete wrote a lot of fine songs, but he was always open to learning new ones and popularizing them. Such as Woody Guthrie, he popularized This Land Is Your Land. If it weren't for Pete, probably nobody would be singing that anymore, or So Long It's Been Good to Know Ya, or many of his other songs. Sometimes he'd take a song and tweak it and add something, change a word here and there, change the melody a little bit, change the way it's played, so that it was kind of a hybrid, not all Pete, but a little bit of Pete in there. And one example of that is We Shall Overcome. Pete originally heard that song at the Highlander Folk School, but originally it was a gospel hymn called I'll Overcome Someday. And then it became a union song, We Will Overcome Someday. And Pete heard that, and he thought that shall was a little more poetic and oomphy than will, so he changed the We Will Overcome to We Shall Overcome, and had a kind of I think he called it the 12-bar kind one verse of We Shall Overcome. We shall overcome. We shall overcome. We shall overcome someday. Oh, deep in my heart, I do believe that we shall overcome someday. You're such a great bunch of singers. I wish I could sing with you more, but I got a lot to say too. So, for example, Pete wrote a song that he recorded on an album that was called Rainbow Quest. It was called Where Have All the Flowers Gone? But it only had 3 verses. And a young man by the name of Joe Hickerson, who later became a folk musicologist and the director of the folk archives at the Library of Congress, but before that, he heard that song, he liked it, but he said, it's too short. So he added a few more verses. It ended with Where Have All the Young Men Gone to Soldiers? And Joe said, well, we'll add, where have all the soldiers gone? Graveyards. Where have all the graveyards gone? Flowers. Oh, it makes a circle. He thought that was very cool. He brought it to Camp Woodland. Unfortunately, it was the year I wasn't at Camp Woodland, but he taught it to the kids at camp. Pete came to sing for them, and while they were waiting for him to get on stage, a young CIT was leading, that's counselor in training, if you don't know, she was leading the kids in this song, Where Have All the Flowers Gone, which was a big hit at camp. So according to Joe, who was standing outside with Pete, Pete listened, and then he pricked up his ears, then he pulled out a pencil and a paper, and he started writing, and said, I had even completely forgotten I wrote that song, but with those extra verses, that really makes it a lot better. And that's how Where Have All the Flowers Gone came to be famous. So again, in the interest of time, let's just do the first verse of that one.